Heaven Standard Earth.
Today we're looking at Heaven Standard and Earth 6-count Sinawali drills. We're choosing 6-count for today because that's the standard. There's other numbering systems. You do 4, 12, whatever. But we're doing 6 today because that's typically the ones you're going to see. And in our classes, that's almost always the ones you're going to see. And we'll talk a little bit then right up top about what Heaven Standard Earth mean and where the terminology comes from and how it's helpful for us. So Heaven, Standard, and Earth, these terms are given to us from Guro Inosanto, and as I understand it from the way that Guro Dan has taught us, is that Heaven 6, when we talk about this, it's because the orientation of the tip of the stick and the direction that it moves towards your opponent, the tip of the stick is pointed towards the ceiling, towards the heavens, hence the name Heaven 6. And as far as I'm aware, it's Guro Inosanto's mother that named these. Earth 6 is the opposite of that, so as you can imagine, then that means that the tips are pointed towards the ground, towards the earth. And then Standard is a mix of both, the name coming from the fact that most Filipino martial art groups will do this one, and so it's just sort of an across-the-board standard. Now, I like to teach these, and the way that I understand them best is based off the X. So many things in Filipino martial art come from the X or from an X and a plus sign transposed one over the other, which is still effectively 2 X's, and that's what we call escala. And so when we look at Heaven 6, we're looking at what we call female triangle, which is the top half of the X, right? So it's everything that's north of this point. And so those are the angles this way, right? These angles. Standard is what we would call a lateral triangle, and so it's anything to the side of the middle axis like this, right, the north-south line. And then Earth 6 is, again, this horizontal one, anything below it, so it's called male triangle. So this shape here is female triangle, male triangle where the tip is pointed up, and then lateral triangle where the tip is in the middle, like this. So what this means for our purposes is that for Heaven 6, for example, we'll be doing a Sinawali pattern that involves moving in this angle and this angle downward towards the center, right? From the outside towards the inside of the X. For Earth 6, the opposite is true. We're starting with the tip down towards the earth and moving then again towards the center of the X, the tip of this triangle, if you will. And then for Standard, it's a high and a low angle this way and this way, mixing up both ideas, but again moving in the direction of the axis here, the direction of the junction of these lines. When we use the term Sinawali, especially as an Inosanto family school or as an MKG family school, we use the term Sinawali to describe any weaving pattern, in particular with the weapon, but I suppose you could call that Sinawali if you're empty hands as well. And so always important to remember that any Filipino martial art group might have a different application, or rather a different definition for one term to the next from the group that's down the road from it. So it's important to remember then that we're using the term Sinawali to imply any weaving drill. Sinawali is a kind of weaving, right? We're talking about like basket weaving, that kind of thing. That's what that term means. That's a translation of that term or another usage of that term. So it goes then with the sticks, that when we work a weaving pattern of some sort like this, we're practicing a weaving or Sinawali drill. So make sure you always remember that the terminology that we use in our school will be different than another, and to not engage in weird internet debates over what one term means versus another, or who's right or who's wrong. Spend that time picking up the stick, moving and training.
Okay, so my microphone died, of course, as I was filming this, so we're going to do this voiceover style. I tried to frame this here, doing Heaven 6, so you can see both training along with and then see the mirror image, so it's going to be framed this way for the whole video. So we're looking at Heaven 6 here, again with the tips pointed up towards the heaven. We start on the right side. So we call this a chambered position. That's my right stick by the right shoulder, left stick beneath the right arm, not in the armpit. It's going to get in the way, so just below the arm in some way, so you can ensure a little bit of clearance from your own right elbow. So swing the right stick first. You're going to hit through the center line towards the other shoulder. The left stick beneath it will come along In tracing that same line, the right one then goes out and back to tuck underneath, and we're now left chambered on the left side. Left stick pulls through. Right stick pulls through and winds up right next to it, and the right stick, or left stick, excuse me, goes out and back underneath. So again, we're tracing that female triangle, that V shape here, the top half of the X, like that, being traced with both these things. The only lines that you're going to use are these lines. So starting on the right side, pull through, and then the other side, pull through, and that side. Again, just those angles. So that's right one, pulling through the center line. Left one, tracing that same line. Now the right goes out and tucks back underneath, having not pulled through. First pulls through, second pulls through, third retracts. Pulling through the center, out and back. That's the left stick, the right stick, and the left stick tucking underneath. Right comes after, left and right. Always alternating hands then, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, etc. Pulling through, out and back, through, out and back. These can be big slashing motions, right? We usually call lob tick. Or a fluid strike. They can also be kind of narrow, as if you're bouncing off of a target. That's more of an impact than a slash, right? Which maybe implies that you're hitting with a stick instead of with a blade, but that's not necessarily the case, just different styles of hitting, right? So these are kind of snapping off of a target or pulling through the target conversely. That pulls through the center, slashes through the center, snaps out and back to retract underneath, through, out and back. The terms that we typically use for that are lob tick, that pulls through the center, lob tick, and wittick. That's the one that retracts. Any cheating blow is the wittick, meaning that it snaps back, it's not a full shot. So here from a different perspective then, we see the top one from the right side, bottom one from the right, and the top becomes the bottom. Top stick, bottom stick, top becomes bottom. Top, bottom, top becomes bottom. Through, out and back. Notice then that it starts in what you might call heaven 3, which is 2 sets of heaven 3, but eventually here you want to get to where 1, 2 at beat 3, when it retracts, you're already sending out beat 1 on the other side, right? So that instead of that break in the action, it becomes a constant chain like that. So that's maybe a differentiation between 2 sets of heaven 3 on both sides of the body and 1 set of heaven 6. It's the same principle as jab and then cross and then hook is not necessarily the same as jab, cross, hook as a combination. So this, as heaven 6, a Sinawali pattern, we want to create constant momentum and fluidity while it's unbroken, again, like a chain. So this being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So as one is moving out or through, which is to say, as it's coming to its resting place, the other one is beginning its motion. So this is just picking up the speed a little bit, seeing it maybe a little closer to where you might be aiming as far as progressing towards movement like that. Okay, so for standard 6, as before, we say we're using the high and low elements. That's essentially 1 heaven and 1 earth element making lateral triangle. That is a side of the X, not a top or a bottom. So that's a high forehand coming through, starting right chambered as before. You can start either side. We usually start right. That's top stick. Now the bottom stick goes low diagonal, and the top one stays high yet again. So your first strike is tip up, second is tip down, and third strike is tip up. I'm trying to slow here so you can see that you have to sort of transition after beat 2, getting that tip out of the way like this so that it can chamber high. All right, so you got to kind of turn that over, and that will happen fluidly and naturally over time, but just so you can kind of see the motion at least one step at a time for how to pull that through and pivot it out of the way and leave enough clearance room for beat 3. That's 1 high, 1 low, 1 high that retracts underneath as before. Pull through, out and back. That lob tick, wittick, or through, out and back for a 6-count Sinawali acts as a kind of standard. One high, one low, one high. High, low, high. Working your high, low, high variables is really important in this art. Understanding the who or the like what, when, how of changing up your lines of attack like that is really, and it's really beneficial in any martial art. So picking up the speed and pace here a little bit, again, just with an awareness that this is maybe the direction you're pointing your ship as far as progress goes. And I'm sure you'll get faster than what I'm showing here, but that's the general style of the movement. So again, you can see that we're making lateral triangle this side of the X by virtue of one high and one low, like that. And it's also then a good opportunity to further your education and understanding of the geometric nature of how Filipino martial art is traditionally trained. So here from behind, if you want to follow along from directly behind, that's what that looks like. Not just trying to give you a nice butt shot. Again, lateral triangle, one high, one low. Sometimes you'll almost scoop up with that low shot, maybe bend the knees and load a little bit. And then sometimes it's just going to be kind of a quicker motion. You'll find your own path with that. You want to make sure pulling through here that those act as parallel lines, 1 and 2 there when they come to rest. And again, just picking up the pace just to give it a different understanding or awareness of how it starts to look and feel over time. And so again, we have our last style of Sinawali 6 pattern, which is Earth 6, so all the tips pointing down here. For a lot of us, this becomes the most challenging because the clearance can be difficult. So I was trying to demonstrate there, at least maybe on beat 3, it's hard to get these things moving. So one thing that will help to keep your tips pointing to the ground is to pivot. Right, so if I start here with the right foot pivoting, I can use the mechanics of the body to deliver this blow and to further ensure clearance of the limbs so that I can get these shots out without being restricted by my own limbs, by my own body or whatever. So, you can use the knees to generate force too, that sort of sinking and lifting, almost like a squat motion, can really help add some emphasis and impact to these shots. But same as before, all the shots pointing low. This is effectively male triangle. And you can pull these all the way up like that, so they're big sweeping or slashing motions, or by snapping them through like the others. Now, in the beginning, if this is a new skill for you, just focus on moving the sticks, getting out of your own way, as it were, trying not to hit yourself in the elbow and those kinds of things, and that'll happen. But then over time, focus on the body mechanics, on the weight transfer, on what feels natural for you, and then in time as well, there's just basic stick movement without footwork or without much in the way of body mechanics. But in time, you'll start to go, okay, well, I prefer this style of movement to achieve this objective, whereas this style of movement is better suited for this objective. And that's true for footwork or really any element of martial art. You're going to find that the circumstances will dictate much of it. So in the beginning, you can kind of train in a neutral context. So here, just trying to communicate the fact that if your retraction here at the end is not appropriate, if it's in the way, you're going to get hung up. So try to pull these sticks through in parallel lines. See that turnover where they're effectively parallel? That will help ensure some clearance. The other element to keep in mind is the arm placement. So you'll notice 1, 2, when that turns over, it really clears and goes not just on my shoulder, but almost behind the back, like that, right? Yes, there we go. So that you've got more clearance, more assurance that you're not going to run into yourself. And some of that will just come with time. Again, the pivoting, the arm placement, all of those will help to ensure that you're not in your own way. You see the elbow come clear across to the center line that way. That helps to ensure this. You'll find your own natural path through that, and just have awareness that it takes time. There are some tricks to ensure that you don't run into your own body, which is obviously important with stick or blade. And just be patient with that, and you can kind of rewatch that if you want a little bit of input on where to place different parts of the body. So here then with tips up, pointing to the heavens. This is heaven 6 from a front-facing perspective. pulling through, clearing the stick out of the way. Next one is standard 6, which will include one high and one low, as you now know. Outer back, one high, one low, outer back. And you can kind of play between both of these or isolate them. And then Earth 6 coming up here is number 3. So this is seeing the tips pointing towards the earth. Here, you're targeting for these low line, tip low shots. It's gonna really depend on, again, on your circumstances. You could be hitting towards somebody's incoming hand. You could be hitting towards the chin. You could be hitting towards the midsection. Typically, the way that we approach this, especially in the beginning, is that your high line targets are like your angle 1 and 2, while your low line targets, like those found via Earth 6 or even the low beat and standard 6, are to, generally speaking, the knee and the shin area. So that way you're really stretching that movement out, seeing the high line shots on the body about as high as you can go with them. The low line being maybe not as low as the big toe, but the shin and the knee. So what we're looking at here is a footwork option for this kind of movement. That's female triangle with that V shape, just lateral stepping here, and then male triangle, like a star pattern, 6 directions of stepping. You're going to step on a female triangle for the upper half of the X style of slashing, which is heaven 6. So advancing foot 45 degrees for the motions that mirror that. Stepping off to the side with a slight weight transfer, and then stepping back at a 45 for male triangle, while we slash Earth 6, which is effectively male triangle. So we're seeing here, stepping forward with tips up. So the feet and the sticks are moving in similar patterns. What else is helpful with this too is when you step back on Earth 6, on this male triangle line, you clear a little bit of a runway to be able to swing those shots. So I guess you could call that, from a tactical perspective, it's better, which is to say there's less likely going to run into your own body by stepping back this way. So as always, the circumstances will dictate the how and the when and the why you move. But as a baseline movement drill, it's not bad to practice it in this fashion. Okay, that's it. Bowing out for this one. Remember, heaven, standard, Earth 6. Also talking about female triangle, male triangle, and the significance of geometry. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you got questions.